Laura. Welcome to our last series of the yamas and the niyamas. We're on our fifth niyama, which is Ishvara Pranidhana. And Ishvara Pranidhana is one of the elements of yoga practice that makes even just the hatha practice, our process of doing postures, more than just an exercise. When we're practicing yoga in any of its different forms, we want to always be connected to this element of bowing to something greater than ourselves, or acknowledging our higher power, or something that is the source of all life. When we're doing our practice, it's an expression of gratitude for the life that we were given and the body that we exist in, so that we can do our practice and we're able to go out into the world and experience all of the things that make up our life. So it creates this sense of our practice being something sacred. In the beginning of your practice, when you sit down on your mat and you're about to start moving, we usually take a period of time to rest and be still, that we call a centering. And your centering is this process of shifting from an external focus of being aware of where you have to go and what you have to do, and how you look and what you're wearing and all of these external things, to an internal focus. When we center, we think about, how is my breathing? What does my body feel like today? Are there aches and pains that I was ignoring because I was running around trying to handle all of these different things? What is my mental state like today? Am I cloudy, or do I have a sense of clarity in my thought process? So all of those inward things, and then layering on top of that, what is my connection to the world around me, the physical world, the people around me, and what is my connection to the higher power or the source? So when we start our practice and we're going through that assessment, we come to a point where we set an intention for our practice. What do we want to focus on? What are we dedicating the effort that we're putting into our practice toward? It might be to bring balance back into your body, bring balance back into your mind, to create connection between your mind, your body, and your spirit. In terms of Ishvara Pranidhana, we're trying to create a strong connection to God or your higher power. So one of the things that we talked about when I was staying at the ashram in Virginia was that your practice is really a form of devotion, a form of saying how grateful you are that you have this body, that you're able to move. And at the beginning of your practice, if you sit there and you say, I'm going to dedicate my practice today to my higher power, then everything that you do is like a moving prayer. It becomes this very deep, sacred practice. Every movement, every breath, every mantra that you use is something that you're dedicating toward the divine with gratitude. So it's this transformation. It's very different than taking a Zumba class or something like that that you might do for exercise. And I'd like to make that distinction because nowadays that line is getting really blurry. There's a lot of people who take power yoga classes, whether it's at a gym or even some studios now are kind of moving in that angle where your yoga practice is something that you use to sweat and to make yourself look better in a bathing suit. And I always try to emphasize the fact that it's so much more than that. We are not just trying to work on our physical body. That's one of the layers that we exist in. And through our practice, we're supposed to use that as an evolution to discover all the different layers that are there. Now, the interesting thing is that the way that the yamas and the niyamas are ordered, there's a very specific order to them. And Ishvara Pranidhana is the final of the yamas and the niyamas. This is what everything has been building up toward. So we study all these other things. We study compassion, we study truth, we study cleanliness, we study contentment. And with all of that groundwork done, when we're living our life according to those internal and external rules, then this is kind of a natural follow-up to all those different things. We're already living in a way that's very pure and in alignment with the way that the Creator would want us to live. So feeling connected or bowing humbly to the source of life is just a natural final step in that progression. So think about that when you're going through the yamas and the niyamas, kind of that build up toward this final sense of connection. So when we study yoga, and in teacher training, we talked about what does the word yoga mean, and usually the definition that you'll see is union. Yoga means to yoke, to bring together. And the traditional sense of that we always hear about is the mind-body-spirit connection, kind of that now cliche combination of those three different things. But it's a union with everything that's around you, the people around you, recognizing that we're all going through our human experience, and everybody's kind of on a different path. Their story, their details are a little bit different, but being human is such a strong connection. And even going beyond being human, being alive, humans, animals, plants, just having that divine spark within you that you're alive, there's this strong connection. There's more that is similar than is different between all those living beings. So noticing that union that you have with everything around you. We're trying to let go of that sense of separateness. The union with the divine, and then the union within yourself, making sure that within yourself there's no disconnection between your energy, your physical body, your mental processes, your emotional processes. All of those things are strongly connected to each other. We're not ignoring any of them or focusing more on the physical aspect of our practice than we are on the internal aspect of our practice. We need to balance and unite those two things. There's this element of surrender. I know in Kundalini there's a mantra that we use sometimes, which is let go, let God. Let the universe show you what you need to do when you feel like you're lost. Let the universe pick up where you feel like you're lacking. So if you can find this sense of surrender and let go of the struggle that you really have, some people will kind of identify with the struggle. They feel like the struggle is part of life and it means that they're working hard. But if we can get to that point where we're still giving effort, we're still trying as hard as we can at everything that we do, but we let go of the outcome. We let it be what it needs to be. That sense of surrender really comes with a peace and a lack of suffering, because the outcome is what it is and we're going to do our best no matter what. But the divine or the universe or just the natural order of things is going to take place. So we don't have control over the outcome, and when we surrender to that, it really puts you into that space of peace. It's a big thing that we work on in restorative practices or in yin practices, being able to surrender. It's very hard for some of us. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on with this practice, because it's a strong connection to God or a godlike figure, Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of devotion. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when you say the word yoga, most people picture a hatha practice. They picture a mat and somebody doing down dog or warrior poses or anything like that. That's what most people think yoga is. But there are so many different versions of yoga, and Bhakti Yoga being one of them. So Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of devotion. It's a devotional practice to higher power. A lot of times, since yoga came from India and a lot of people practice the Hindu religion in India, you'll see different deities that they'll practice their devotion toward. It might be Ganesh, it might be Shiva. Any of those Hindu god figures might be the focus of the devotional practice. But it can really be anything. You're not limited to anything specific, which is why I like yoga so much. In terms of a spiritual practice, it's really an open-ended question. So you'll see me using a lot of different terms to explain what you're trying to connect to when we talk about Ishvara Pranidhana. And it's a fill-in-the-blank kind of thing. So if you like to call your higher power God, then you're devoting your practice to God. If you call it the source of life, if you call it the divine, if you call it Shiva, whatever you want to put that label on it for you personally, your personal relationship with that entity, then that is what you do in your practice. It might even be as general as just nature or the universe or the natural order of things. Anything like that is going to fit the description that we're trying to go for with this. back to Bhakti Yoga, the interesting thing about this is that we think so heavily of yoga being postures, but Bhakti Yoga is actually the most commonly practiced form of yoga worldwide. Not so much in the United States, but worldwide. There are more people practicing Bhakti Yoga than any other form of yoga. So there's this very strong connection to a devotional practice. And I hear a lot of times people telling me things like, oh, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible enough, or I can't do yoga because I hurt my hip a few years ago, or whatever it might be. And I try to explain that even physical practice of yoga, there's a huge scale of how rigorous it can be. But using yoga in its greater sense, everybody can do yoga. If you're alive and you're breathing, there's a form of yoga that you could practice, whether it's devotional yoga, whether it's studying the scriptures, or meditation or breath work. There's some form of yoga that anybody can practice. So don't feel like you have to fit into that yoga box of being really flexible and really healthy and doing lots of postures on the floor like a pretzel. It doesn't have to be like that. So a big part of this concept of Ishvara Pranidhana comes from the word Namaste, which we use at the end of almost every yoga class or yoga practice. We bow to each other as a sign of respect and we say Namaste. And every once in a while a student will ask me, what does Namaste mean? And like a lot of things in Sanskrit, there's no direct translation that means exactly the same thing in English. There's always something lost a little bit from Sanskrit to English. But generally we say that Namaste means that the divine spark, or the peace of God that resides within me, acknowledges that same divine spark within you. I think of the movie Avatar, if you've ever seen that. I had like this little light bulb go off when I was watching that movie, because in the movie Avatar they look at each other and they say, I see you. And it's, I see you on a deep level. And that's kind of the same as when we say Namaste, is I see you on a soul level. I can see our similarities from the very deepest level of our being. And that comes from this concept of we are all pieces of the divine, we're all pieces of the universe expressing themselves in these different entities. So it's a very powerful word that we use at the end of our practice to seal everything that we've done together and create this sense of union between all of the people in the room. So when it comes to our practice, I really enjoyed teaching this class this week, and I think my students really needed just kind of a slow down and get really deeply connected to something beyond themselves, because we get this tunnel vision. A lot of the times during our week, we'll start to focus so strongly on our to-do list or the things that we have to do for work or home or family that we feel like that little world is everything. And when we get so strongly focused on that tunnel vision, we forget about the bigger picture. So using our practice to create union with the things outside of ourselves and create union with the divine lets us drop those problems, and it gives us a better perspective on what we feel like our life is doing. So for the practice, for our hatha aspect of our practice, we're going to do a lot of floor work, a lot of grounding, a lot of hip opening, hamstring opening, but most of it being done on the floor so that there's a sense of being able to really surrender into the poses. When we do standing poses, there's always an element of having to engage your muscles because you're working against gravity. You have to hold yourself up. You're letting go to a point of trying to open certain areas, but there's always that work that's involved. So when we do floor work, there's a much greater sense of surrender and just being able to totally let go because you don't have to hold yourself up. It's going to have a good restorative aspect. We used all of the props this week: the bolsters, the sandbags, the eye pillows, the straps, the blocks, the blankets, everything, and use that to make ourselves completely comfortable in each of the poses, make everything accessible, and to foster that sense of surrender, being able to let go and feel connected. And there's an element of prostration in this practice too, where we flatten ourselves completely out against the floor, or we use poses where we bow ourselves down to the floor, either bringing our forehead down to the earth or the top of the head down to the earth, because that's a very humble movement that we use in our practice, and it's connecting to the earth. We call it Mother Earth sometimes because it is the source of all life. It's the source of everything that we need to sustain our life, and all of the things that eventually bring life come about from the earth. So bringing ourselves down and connecting to that is a really strong practice to connect to this sense of Ishvara Pranidhana. When we do our breath work, we're going to do Sitali breath, or the curled tongue breath. Sometimes it's called the taco breath. If you can curl your tongue, you're going to breathe through the curled tongue very slowly, because that has a cooling aspect to it. And for this practice, we want to cool the body down. We want to let go of restlessness, because when we're restless, we're not connected to the source. When we feel settled and we have clarity, that's when we're connected to the earth and we're connected to the source of life. So we'll use that cooling breath to get ourselves into a space where that's easier to happen. The mudra that we're going to use is Pran Mudra. And Pran Mudra is 2 fingers curled in and 2 fingers extended out. It's a mudra of creating balance with the body. It lowers down our pitta, our internal fieriness, and it increases our connection with kapha, which is the earth element, the grounding element. By decreasing our pitta and increasing our kapha, we're going to get into that state where we're more receptive and we can surrender when we're in the poses. The mantra that we're going to use is Soham. Soham is a mantra that we frequently use in yin practice, because when we do those really long holds for the poses, it's very easy for your mind to start to wander. It happens to everybody. If you use a mantra, especially a very simple but very profound mantra like Soham, it helps your mind so much more to stay focused, and then you're going to get the benefits of the practice tenfold when you're able to give yourself that mental break. You'll see that change your practice tremendously when you don't let yourself start to wander as much. So I hope that you were able to join me for the next video, which is going to be our practice that's going to pull in Ishvara Pranidhana and help us to connect to our source and connect to our higher power, and really just give ourselves that strong sense of meaning that we're always searching for in our life. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste.